We have Charlie on the line. Charlie, you're from up in Alabama. What's your legal question tonight?
If you're riding in the passenger seat of someone's car and you get pulled over and they ask for your ID, do you have to show it?
All right. That's kind of a loaded question, Charlie. Let me give it to Rusty, even though he's not licensed in Alabama. He's going to tell you kind of the practicalities of it, and I'm going to talk with you a little bit about Alabama.
Yeah, so again, I'm a Florida attorney, and attorneys are licensed by state, so I can't give you advice in Alabama. However, if the situation was here in Florida, I would tell you to absolutely give the law enforcement officer your ID. They have to have some indication that there's a crime or that they're doing some investigation to get it from you. But the key here is they don't necessarily need to tell you what they're doing it for. So, you could tell them, no, go pound sand. I don't want any part of that. I'm not giving you my ID. That's not happening. But if they've got something that they're doing in the lawful performance of a duty and you don't give them the ID, they can charge you with another crime called resisting an officer without violence during the lawful performance of a duty, which is a misdemeanor. So you probably just don't want to pick that with a law enforcement officer. If for some reason they shouldn't have done that and there's a charge that comes out of it, your attorney on the back end can fight that. Again, they do have to have some indication that a crime has occurred and be doing investigation in it. And on the back end of that, that's a really good question and potentially a motion to suppress for your attorney.
And guess what? That's the answer that you're going to get in the state of Alabama as well. Yeah. It's a practical issue. And so you may be absolutely 100% right. It may be your right under the Constitution, right, to not show your ID. I mean, we have that. But there are situations, like you said, if there's under the lawful performance, and you've got a driver that's been pulled over. Let's say the driver's been pulled over for DUI, and they open up the door and, kind of smells like a little stinkweed running around out there. Oh. Does he have to give the ID? You better give your ID. And so the better part of this, really, Charlie, is that you give up your ID, and like Rusty said, allow your attorney to then, if something does come out of it, allow your attorney then to defend it, motion to suppress evidence, motion to exclude evidence. There's something called, you can't have fruit of the poisonous tree, a great quote from a criminal defense case. And if it's an unlawful stop, then you can challenge it. If it's an unlawful ask for your ID, then you can challenge it. There's lots of different ways to challenge it, but you may not be, when you've got an officer there, you've got an officer on the side of the road, you don't know if it's day or night, you don't know how many people the officers tried to, or pulled over that night, you don't know if the officer's having a good day or a bad day. And that officer has absolute 100% discretion at that point in time whether or not to charge you. The officer can be wrong. Nothing's really going to happen to the officer. The officer can be wrong. But do you want to run that risk and then have to go hire a lawyer over something that's, that could have been taken care of simply by just saying, here's my ID?
And I agree with you completely. I'll tell you, one of the most interesting things, or not interesting things, one of the things that we see a lot is the officer will say that they smell marijuana, which is always interesting, especially when they don't find marijuana. But many times they'll say that they smell marijuana, and that gives them a lawful search of the car, the inside of the car, and everyone and everything in it. So if you're getting in the way of that could be a very bad thing. So and you just don't know where a stop is gonna lead. And
the officer doesn't have to tell you.
Yeah, they don't have to tell you. So it's unfortunately it's one of those things. Where an attorney on the back end, if something bad happens, is best to go back and kind of fight that battle for you versus them hooking you up and taking you right there for resisting an officer without violence when, really there was no reason not to just hand over your license.